We were in the Philippines. I spent my first tour in the Air Force was in the military. In the military was to the Philippine Islands. And I've been married 3 times. I was getting a bunch of trouble. I called started to blackmail a major, and the military was starting to kick me out, at least out of the Philippines. So I went to she was my house girl at the time. I said, well, let's just go get married. And we went down to the Justice of Peace and got married. He spoke Tagalog, which is the Philippines. I never understood a word he said. Next thing I know, I was married and bringing a wife home. I come back States, and about 3 or 4 years later, she just got into the wrong crowd, and I couldn't take any more of it. So she decided to move to Washington, D.C., and I drove her up to Washington, D.C., and going through the divorce, and that was the first time I actually had a beer with my dad. We went back to Charleston, and I went to the club and just got drunk. Just again, back into the old habits. And this one girl just came into my life. She was the cop on base. We weren't married but 3 or 4 days, and we had it annulled quickly. It just wasn't going to work out. I went to church, all through high school and all through school. I was more the devil's advocate. I took everything and I believed it and all, but it was always like one little nagging question, what was wrong with the story? And then trying to find answers to questions, I guess. Because like I said, I played more devil's advocate. I don't know if it was, to get me to learn more about it, or it was to, find fault in everything. Kevin kept asking me to come to church, basically to see the band. And he kept on and kept on. And he wasn't pushy about it, but he just kept saying, come to church. And we sat there and talked about religion. We talked about everything. And finally I asked him a question, and he said, well, you got to come to church and ask Dave the question. So I finally just got up one morning and one Sunday and showed up for church. Pretty much been coming ever since. The band impressed me. Daniel's a unique individual. And after talking to him and seeing the way they played and the way Kevin talked about the church itself, the whole thing really just started to impress me. The first day I met Dave, Kevin said the church was having a cook-off, and it was more or less to meet the family. And we showed up at the Harrisburg Harrisburg Park. We ate some chili, and that's when I first met Dave, and he kind of invited me to church. And meeting him, in that situation is a lot different than meeting him at church. Some people, like in the military, the officers, they can't take their uniforms off, and others are, once they're away from the work, so to speak, they let their hair down. Well, I was going to see if Dave's, the real deal. He's the way he is here is the way he's at church. He puts you at ease. He's very comfortable around people. It's fun. I guess being around him. Like I said, you want to be a better. To me, I want to be a better man. When I'm around him, I want to not just show the respect, for the cloth, but respect for the man is, who Dave is, in church and outside of church. One thing led to another, and they started having problems needing truck drivers to drive, the church truck to the mall. So I volunteered to do that, and I do that once a month now. My name is Kyle Moore, and this is my Kinetic.